Yes, I did try something new with my hair today, but it just made me look like a horse girl. I feel like it might have been better if I didn't have flannel on, like plaid. But she can't be bothered to change, can she? So we're going with it, horse girl. It's happening, it's happening. Hello and welcome, and I'm very excited if you've clicked on this video because from the title you'll probably gather it's not a bookish video, and the majority of the videos that I make are about books, and I make book reviews and I talk about books and I make reading vlogs and all of that stuff. But one of my goals for this year was to make more film content because I'm a film graduate and aspiring film director, and I want to talk more about films and TV and adaptations and all of that cool stuff. So this is the start of a new series on my channel where bi-monthly, learned what that word means like a week ago, so I'm using it everywhere. Bi-monthly I will be making a film wrap-up of all the films that I've been watching, but I need your help to figure out what the format of this is going to be, because in my drafts at the minute in my notebook it's called Favourite First Watches Jan to Feb, and then the next one will be March to April, and then May to June, essentially like throughout the year. So, and obviously the title Favourite First Watches implies that I'm going to talk about new films, right? Because every year I set myself a challenge to watch as many new films as I possibly can, and that's not just films that are coming out in cinema, that's just any film that I've never seen before, because I have a rather irritating tendency to drown myself in nostalgia and always rewatch and go back to these same films, these same TV shows. And obviously being involved in the film industry, I'm not involved in the film industry, but I'm trying to be. Being like an aspiring film creator or whatever, it's kind of important to be aware of what's new and coming out, and like film history, and just be exposed to as many different types of filmmaking and storytelling as I possibly can be. And obviously rewatching the same things again and again does not help me with that endeavour. So I thought by making this series my favourite first watches, it will encourage me to seek out more films that I've never seen before so I can talk about them. And for this video today I've listed out my top 10 first watches between January and February, and going forward I can either keep this doing like a top 10 of my favourite first watches for like the 2 months that I'm talking about, or I'm happy to just talk about every single film I watched, but then that could be a very long video. So I don't know, I'm doing like a little ask the audience, what do you think? Should I keep it to top 10 favourite first watches that I'm talking about, or would you just like to hear about literally everything I'm watching in that period of time? I don't know. So before we get into actually giving you any proper content in terms of reviews, I'm gonna hit you with some stats. And unfortunately we had a bit of a pathetic start to 2021 film watching. So across January and February 2021 I only watched 16 new films out of 19 total watches. So I've only sat down to watch a film 19 times since the beginning of the year, which sounds like a lot, but like it's really not, because that's 60 days, so 19 watches, 19 out of 60, that's just not a lot. So I watched 9 new to me films in January and 7 new to me films in February, and obviously like I said 16 out of the 19 films I've watched since the beginning of the year were new films, which is pretty good because I'm trying to cut down on how much I rewatch, which means I only rewatched 3 films in that 2-month period, and those were, if you're curious, Bridget Jones's Diary, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and 10 Things I Hate About You. 10 Things I Hate About You. I'm already breaking the rules that I've set out for myself. I'm talking about a rewatch and not a new film. But anyway, 10 Things I Hate About You. I forgot how perfect that film is. It's so good. So the first new film of the year that really stuck in my brain that I was very excited when I watched it was Panic Room, and I was really surprised that I'd never seen this before because I love Jodie Foster, I love David Fincher, and it has baby Kristen Stewart in it, so I was very excited to watch this. And this film follows Jodie Foster and her daughter, I don't know their names, I'm sorry, as they move into this very beautiful New York apartment, kind of too big for the two of them, and it has this very fancy panic room installed, and as they're kind of viewing the house, the estate agent goes into a lot of detail about this panic room, and you're thinking, okay, well, one, the film is called Panic Room, but you're like, okay, we know this panic room is going to be like a big deal in this film because we're spending a lot of time talking about all the different things it does. And David Fincher wastes no time. On their first night in this new house, their house gets broken into and the panic room is required. And this film was just so well shot. There were so many shots that I'm like, how did they get that? And then I realized that it's probably VFX, but it doesn't look like VFX because there's not any kind of like CGI monsters or anything. But certain shots where they're like going through vents or going through walls, and I'm like, oh my god, how do you even shoot that like with a camera? How do you get into those spaces? And it's VFX, and how it's all spliced together is just kind of just makes my head hurt. But ooh, it is just very tense. And despite Jodie and Kristen going through this horrific ordeal in which they're kind of trapped in a panic room and the home invaders are like wandering around their house with guns, you know, very stressful, very traumatic event, it did not put me off wanting a beautiful apartment in New York City. I'm like, well, at least they got to stay there for like half a night. I was still jealous of their apartment. Yes, I know their lives were at risk, whatever, but like, that apartment though. And I forgot to say that these films aren't in like order of favourites or anything, it is just in chronological order of like when I watched them between the beginning of the year and now. So the next new film that was a firm favourite of mine as soon as I watched it was Promising a Woman, and this won't come as a surprise if you have been on my channel for the last 2 months, because like 3-4 weeks ago, time isn't real, I don't know, I made a video about why you need to watch Promising a Woman, so I'm not going to talk too much about it now because I made a whole damn video about how much I love that film and all of the different details in that film that just make it phenomenal. Next one I want to talk about is Happiest Season, and yes, I am the queen of watching Christmas movies when it is not seasonally appropriate. I will be watching Love Actually in June and no one can stop me. And this is the second film out of my favourites so far that has Kristen Stewart in it, so you know, she has the range, she can do it all. I love the cozy Christmas vibes, I loved Dan Levy, he's an icon, I love him. And at the time that this came out I saw a few people saying that it was problematic, and I sort of understand where that's coming from, but not really. It's obviously way overdue that we have a sapphic romantic comedy that, you know, gives us all the happy feels, and I think a lot of people, you know, were really excited when it was announced because we don't often get LGBT, you know, representation in like the mainstream, especially like in Christmas movies. It's like Christmas movies are like aggressively straight almost when you look at the posters and you're like, oh, okay, wow. So it was really meaningful for a lot of people that there was going to be a kind of gay Christmas film that was just about being happy and giving you kind of the atmosphere of Christmas, and just like a happy, nice rom-com that wasn't about the struggles of being gay, essentially. Like, gay people were going to be allowed to exist in a happy, unapologetically fluffy movie for once, you know? And people were very excited for that, so it was a bit of a letdown when a huge element of the story of this film is the fact that Harper's girl, what are their names? Kristen Stewart's girlfriend is still in the closet. So Kristen Stewart's girlfriend invites Kristen Stewart to her family's house for Christmas, but they have to pretend that they're not together, that they're just, you know, gal pals, and they're not actually dating and girlfriends. And obviously this is quite stressful for Kristen Stewart because she's very out and proud and open about it, and she doesn't really understand why they have to kind of hide it. And I get why people were kind of let down by that, because yes, it would be nice just to have a sapphic, wonderful film that didn't talk about the struggles of coming out and didn't force Kristen Stewart's character back into the closet. And a lot of people were pointing out that their relationship was unhealthy and toxic because of this element. And I do understand that criticism, but also, like, there are so many straight rom-coms where the relationship is just hella toxic, like very toxic, and I would not ship it in real life, but you just get swept up in it because it's like they're often set in like New York, big cities with like beautiful fashion, and the actors are always attractive, and you just get swept up in it, right? Like, for example, one of my favourite couples to watch is Chuck and Blair on Gossip Girl. They are very toxic, but you just kind of let it go because you get swept up in the vibes and the drama, essentially. And we shouldn't hold Happiest Season to such a high standard when there are so many straight rom-coms that are kind of toxic and gross, but they just get a pass, you know? Because I think by holding it to a higher standard and it getting kind of mixed reception just encourages studios to not really invest or care about those types of narratives anymore. So I think it is important to uplift the film so that we get more versions of that story that maybe don't you know, have the kind of like back in the closet element, if that makes sense. But yeah, all in all, I did really enjoy it, and I think I will definitely be coming back to it when it is Christmas time, or maybe in June, who knows. I never watch Christmas movies when I'm supposed to. The next new film that was a standout for me this year was Invisible Man. And I'm quite late to the party with this. Obviously a lot of people talked about it when it came out at the time, because it is just technically quite brilliant, the way that it's shot, the way that it's done, because obviously the man is invisible. So there are sequences where Elizabeth Moss is fighting this invisible man and you're thinking, oh, okay, oh, how do they do this? But the way that the camera moves around the space and the way that they choose to show you that the man is invisible but also present, it's just very well done. It's just very slick, that's the word I would use for it. The way the camera moves around the space and around them is just very interesting. And the film is a really great metaphor for trauma. So we follow Elizabeth Moss, who at the beginning of the film is escaping in the middle of the night from her abusive husband, I believe, or a boyfriend, but her partner is abusive, so she is escaping in the middle of the night, and she has drugged him so that he doesn't wake up and all of this stuff. And she meets a friend at the bottom of the road and they drive off, but he ends up waking up and gives chase, and it's very high octane, you know, it starts with a bang and you're right there and you're stressed. And then she's hiding out at this friend's house and, you know, trying to kind of keep a low profile, and then they find out that he has died, so she is safe now, essentially. But then she starts being stalked by this invisible man, and she is convinced that it's him, that he has found a way to still control her, like from the afterlife, or he's just not dead and is finding ways to mess with her. And I think that's such a good metaphor, because often abusive relationships don't end as soon as you're taken out of the abusive situation. You know, you are haunted literally by the memory of that, and you don't feel safe even if you are in a safe environment, even if you're with people that you love and you trust. The shadow of that relationship and being controlled for that amount of time stays with you. I guess the one criticism that I would have is just the kind of, I don't know how to say it without spoilers, but there's like a people start to think that she's crazy, right, because she's obviously seeing a man that isn't there and he's invisible, and when she tries to tell people this, they think that she's crazy. And if you've experienced kind of mental health problems, or you have people in your life that experience mental health problems, it is quite a frustrating section of the film, because it does buy into that kind of horror film cliche where, you know, she's being dragged away kicking and screaming by doctors going, you have to believe me. And I don't really, I find it hard to watch things like that, because I just feel like so much of the horror genre demonizes people that struggle with mental health. And then what is the message there? Like, she's screaming that this man is real and that he's there, and like, so, you know, if she's proven right, does that mean like, okay, phew, she wasn't crazy? Or, you know, I don't know, like the people that in these films that are trying to convince everyone that what they're going through is real, they more often than not end up being proven right, essentially. But then in real life, when, you know, people that struggle with mental health problems, they see things that aren't there, or they hallucinate, obviously it's not some supernatural thing. So I just don't know. I feel like it's just not helpful, but then I just don't know how there's another way of showing that. I think I wrote about it a bit more eloquently in my Letterboxd review, so I'll put that in the description. But yeah, all in all, a great film, well shot, great acting. It's just that one little complaint that I had about the kind of, I think it's not just a problem with this film, it's just in general, horror films, they do tend to rely on that as like a fear-mongering tactic, which is why the film Unsane really didn't work for me. It just really rubbed me up the wrong way, because I just hate when horror tries to comment on mental health, because more often than not the people that are mentally ill are like the source of fear, and I'm like, I don't enjoy that. I don't like it. I don't like it. And the next new film that I watched was The Booksellers, which is a lovely documentary about booksellers and bookshops and libraries and antique book fairs. Basically anywhere that you get your books from is kind of covered in this documentary, and it was just from like a filmmaking standpoint, it's not the most sophisticated documentary. It is just kind of talking heads and then like B-roll. I know you're not meant to call it B-roll, it's like visual sequences, but it is just kind of like a camera moving around the bookshop and someone telling you about, oh, here are all these books that I have and I'm a collector, this is what I'm interested in. And then they have interviews. Like, it's not a kind of visually It doesn't break the mold, essentially, is what I'm trying to say, but it just did it for me because I'm a book lover, and I think if you're a book lover too, it will work for you. It talks to a lot of booksellers, mainly in New York, about the bookselling trade and the antique trade, and you know, where it originated from, where it's going, the kind of people that are involved in it, what books sell for a lot of money, how much they sell for. It sort of piqued my interest in like antiquarian books, and I was thinking about like my own book collection and what books that I own would be deemed valuable or not, because different collectors have different things that they deem as valuable. So obviously rare books are deemed as valuable because there's kind of one of a kind, or they're rare in some way, they're hard to track down. But then there are other collectors that aren't really interested in the rarity of books, are interested in what those books meant at the time that they were released. Like they're more interested in the kind of historical context of the books. So for example, they talk to these women that are book collectors, and their main prerogative is just to seek out books that were published by women and were not given a kind of wide enough release at the time, and to kind of, you know, give life to those books and bring them to a new audience, essentially. But if you're a book lover, cannot recommend this documentary enough. And one of the people that they interviewed in the Booksellers was Fran Lebowitz, who I'd never heard of before, and I don't know how, because she is such an iconic figure that I'm just now obsessed with. And Fran Lebowitz herself has a collection of, I think it's 10,000 books, so she was obviously talking about her book collection and her love of books in the Bookseller documentary. And then because of that, I just was doing Google searches on Fran Lebowitz, because, you know, I can't just casually like something, I have to be involved. And that's how I found the Netflix docuseries Pretend It's a City, which just made my life. It was amazing. I adore New York just as a place, as a concept. I have a video coming up soon where I'm going to be talking about books and films set in New York and why they're so magical. But I love New York. The first time I ever went to New York was in 2013. The first thing I did in New York was pose on the Met steps like I was in Gossip Girl, and it's very lame, but that is literally the first thing I did on my first trip to New York. But the series Pretend It's a City just follows Fran Lebowitz and Martin Scorsese, so if you're a film fan, you should watch this too. As they wander around New York, they go into bookshops, they go into bars, they go to kind of areas of cultural significance, and they're just talking about everything. They're talking about New York, the city, what it was like then, what it's like now. They talk about film and art and life and politics and books. And she's hilarious. She's so funny. Like, I've never heard Martin Scorsese giggle so much in my life. It is just glorious, and it's just such a testament to like their friendship. But it's just the kind of friendship that everyone covets, isn't it? Like this kind of cultured but fun, you know. It's like they're talking about these kind of high art things, but it doesn't come off as pretentious. They're just sharing and reveling in things that they both love, and it's just such a joyful series, and I can't recommend it enough. And I found it at the exact right moment as well. I was like in lockdown, feeling very sad and down about my life, and it just got me excited about all the things that I can do when the world opens up again. Primarily travel to New York. And the next like notable new film that I watched was To All the Boys, Always and Forever, which is the third movie in the kind of To All the Boys, Lara Jean and Peter series. I have read all the books by Jenny Han, so I was very excited for this. It was just, I had it earmarked. I knew exactly when it was coming out, and I was ready. I watched it the day it dropped on Netflix with my friend B. And again, there's a bit where they go to New York, so I was just like living my best life, you know? I love that everyone was talking about how hot Peter is in this film, and I was just thinking like, oh my god, New York, New York. New York was doing her hot girl shit as usual. She looked incredible. Oh my god, New York was the most attractive character in To All the Boys, Always and Forever. Hot take. But yes, this movie was not the best of the series, but it was soft and fun and fluffy and aesthetically pleasing, and it's just what I needed. It just filled the hole that was there, and it just did what it was supposed to do, and I'm happy. And then I watched My Mum Tracy Beaker, and I watched it as part of Wilsathon, which is our Jackie Wilson readathon that we were hosting, and it was just so nostalgic. There were definitely some like pacing issues, and it wasn't like the most well-made thing I'd ever seen in my life, and I probably won't find myself going back to it anytime soon, but you know, I can forgive it. It's like it was made for kids, and probably not a lot of budget, and they had a lot to pack into sort of a very short space of time. I can forgive it for its kind of technical shortcomings, but it just provided all of the nostalgia that I wanted, and I just had such a fond memory of watching it because I was in the midst of rereading a bunch of Jackie Wilson books with my friends, and it was just a very lovely, cozy watching experience. It's one of those things, probably like the experience of watching the film was better than the film itself, but I still enjoyed my time. And the next notable new watch was Framing Britney Spears, which I think is honestly essential viewing, and it explores Britney's fight to end her conservatorship, in which her father kind of has control over her person and her estate. So he controls what she does and who she sees, and you know, he sees all of her doctor's reports and like medical reports, also has access to her money, and so it's just shit basically. And conservatorships are reserved mainly for elderly people, so people that physically don't have the mental capacity or physical capacity to take care of themselves or their assets. But obviously that is not really the case for Britney. She's been under this conservatorship for 12 years, I think it is now, and she's gone on tour multiple times during that time, so she is clearly kind of capable. So it just is a little bit gross. And something that really stuck out to me is, you know, one of the people in this documentary said that they cannot imagine this happening to any man in America with Britney's kind of influence. This would just not happen, because people are just so ready to believe that women are not capable of handling things themselves. You know, Britney defined an entire generation, and she is so synonymous, like Paris Hilton, you know, so synonymous with that kind of early influencer, and she really came to prominence in the time of the boy band. And yes, it was because her songs are amazing and catchy, but also because she worked hard and she really cultivated her image. And I just think she really spoke to that generation at the time, and she's still so iconic. And for a woman to have that much power and influence, it's just crazy that she doesn't have any control of her own life. I mean, it's inconceivable that that would happen to somebody at her level of kind of fame and like stature. And some of the clips of the interviews that she did and the way that she was hounded by the press is just horrific, and she was so demonized. I remember all this stuff, you know, when she shaved her head and it was like Britney's had a meltdown, and she was so demonized for that. And obviously, you know, it plays into the kind of aversion our society has with talking about mental health, but she was pushed to that point. That was not her fault. And yeah, for anyone who thinks that like women's rights are over now, like you can vote, you can wear what you want, like what else is there to do? Just watch this documentary and look at the way that Meghan Markle's been treated. Like literally, yes, women are allowed to succeed, and yes, women can soar to the heights of power and fame and status in the Western world, but they are demonized in a way that men are not. And that's just ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And if you enjoyed the Britney doc and you're looking for more fuel to add to your hate fire of the treatment of women in society and whatever, I really recommend also checking out the Paris Hilton documentary, which really opened my eyes last year when I watched it. It's for free on YouTube, so it's really accessible, and it's like really recommended viewing, I think. And the last piece of media I have to talk about is not a film, but I couldn't make this favourite first watches without mentioning it, because it's one of my new favourite things in the entire world, and that is Gravity Falls. And yes, it's a kids show, but don't use that as a reason to dismiss it. It is gorgeous, and it is just as well plotted, it is just as well scripted, or just as well acted as any like live action show. It is absolutely wonderful, and the way I can describe it is like if Twin Peaks meets like a wholesome teen summer camp vibe. So we follow these two twins, Dipper and Mabel, as they spend the summer at their Uncle Stan's mystery shack, which is his kind of like tourist trap on the side of the road in like Midwest America. But then supernatural things start happening in their sleepy little town, and it's just fantastic, and it has so much commentary on the kind of pre-teen, early teen experience, like crushes, boy bands. Oh, it's just wonderful, and it balances all of this kind of wholesome teen summer vibe with this kind of darker, more suspicious kind of conspiracy underbelly of like the supernatural things that are happening, and it is just iconic and wonderful, and I just cannot wait to watch it again and force everyone that I know to watch it, because if you like Stranger Things, this is right up your street. It's the same level of happy, wholesome, with like something sinister going on, some unexplained shit happening, but it is just wonderful, and dare I say better plotted than Stranger Things. I love Stranger Things. I think season 1 is outstanding, like could not be improved upon, but it sort of loses its thread in the later seasons, and that's because it was planned as an anthology series, so they didn't really have a plan for what was going to happen beyond season 1, whereas Gravity Falls, it's only 2 seasons, but it's plotted perfectly and everything falls into place, and they foreshadow so much, and that's why I'm so excited to watch it again. But I cannot recommend it enough. It's on Disney Plus. Go and watch it. It's amazing. And those are all of the new notable things that I watched in the months of January and February. Please do let me know what format you prefer for this type of series. Like, should I just make a top 10 and talk about those, or do you want to hear about everything I've been watching, like watching for the first time and also rewatching? Do let me know, because I'm very excited to continue this, but I obviously want to do it in a way that makes sense. So I will see you very soon with another video soon. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.